Are you certain you truly know the people around you? We like to think we do. We sense when someone is toxic, when their presence presses against our boundaries, when their behavior crosses the invisible lines we've set. But what if the real danger isn't the obvious kind? What if the most destructive people in your life are not the ones you've been taught to see as bad? They can be charming, gentle, sometimes they are your family. While you're building defenses against the obvious villains, you may be leaving the door wide open for something far more dangerous. The quiet, uninvited presence of another person's unconscious spilling into your own mind. Carl Jung devoted his life to studying these hidden processes. In his work on the relationship between the I and the unconscious, he showed us a truth most people still refuse to see. Most of what governs us is hidden from our awareness. This isn't just about you, it's about everyone. Which means the threat can come from anyone. Because if a person is blind to their own darkness, their shadow will search for a place to manifest. And too often, that place is you. Maybe you've never thought about this before, but think about it now. How many times have you walked away from a conversation feeling drained, though nothing overtly hostile was said? How many times has someone placed the weight of guilt on your shoulders for something you never did? How many times have you been drawn into a role you never chose? The rescuer in a tragedy that was never yours to fix. Jung had a name for this: projection. The unconscious mechanism by which a person assigns to you the very qualities they cannot bear to see in themselves. The moment this happens, you cease to be a person in their eyes. You become a symbol, a reflection, an enemy in their private mythology, or a hero they've invented. But all these roles share one truth. None of them have anything to do with who you really are. The most dangerous part? You don't even notice when you've stepped into the trap. You believe you're being compassionate, mature, helpful, but in reality, you're already sinking into someone else's psychological landscape, entangled in conflicts that have nothing to do with you, puppeteered by inner forces that were never yours to begin with. And here is the unsettling truth Jung emphasized. The greatest danger often doesn't come from conscious malice, but from unconscious fragmentation. The real threat lies in those who are cut off from their own psyche, those ruled by masks, unprocessed traumas, inner conflicts, and repressed desires. They are not evil in the obvious sense, but that doesn't make them any less dangerous. Their danger is quiet. It doesn't smash down the door. It seeps in through the cracks, through subtle jabs in conversation, through silences heavy with unspoken accusation, until you begin to doubt yourself. When you lose touch with your own psychological reality, you become an extension of their shadow. Perhaps you're in such a situation now, in a relationship, a friendship, a workplace, or even within your family. And maybe you've been turning the blame inward, asking yourself over and over, what did I do wrong? The answer? Nothing. What's happening is more frightening than simple conflict. You're being used as a vessel for someone else's unconscious. In this journey, we will explore 6 types of emotionally dangerous people Jung would have recognized as carriers of destructive, unintegrated inner forces. They do not act from deliberate cruelty, but under the influence of powers they themselves do not understand. And it is precisely for this reason that they can be so devastating. We will turn to Jung's own words, to his concepts and warnings found in works like The Ego and the Unconscious and Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. With their help, you will learn to recognize these dangerous psychological patterns, not only in others, but, perhaps uncomfortably, in yourself. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Parts of these 6 types may live within you too, so take a deep breath before you go further. After this, you will never see other people, or yourself, in quite the same way. Imagine living next to someone who finds a way to make you feel guilty for every emotion they have. Your presence becomes their trigger. Your life turns into a stage for their emotional storms. At first, you see them as delicate, sensitive, deeply feeling, perhaps even fragile. You tell yourself they just need understanding, but slowly a truth begins to take shape. You are not sharing a life with them. You are being pulled into their private war. And from the very beginning, you were destined to lose. Jung might have called this person an unconscious manipulator, someone who is not aware of their own inner wounds and instead projects them outward as a means of psychological survival. In his writings, Jung warned, "What we do not confront in ourselves, we meet as fate." Sometimes that fate sits across from you at the dinner table. The unconscious manipulator is governed by unprocessed content, old traumas, fragmented emotions, repressed conflicts. But instead of turning inward to face them, they point the spotlight at you. They transform you into the screen upon which they project their inner struggles. Projection, Jung wrote, is a natural function of the psyche. We all do it. But when it is unconscious, it becomes dangerous. Because what is unseen cannot be managed, and when a person is ruled by projection, manipulation doesn't need to shout, threaten, or accuse directly. It operates through emotional shadows, invisible snares that can bind you just as tightly as any chain. Here is the trap. Such people are often charismatic. They can appear warm, intelligent, and unusually attuned to emotion. They may seem deep, capable of understanding you better than anyone else. And so you feel drawn in, not just by their need, but by the quiet belief that you might be the one to finally help them heal. But the longer you try, the deeper you sink. Because they are not working to meet you halfway. They are not looking inward. They are using your empathy as an entry point, a narrow gap through which their unhealed self seeps into your reality. Jung cautioned that these projections are especially dangerous because they assign you a symbolic role: the savior, the enemy, the betrayer, the parent, the hero. Everything but your actual self. And once you've been cast in a role in someone else's inner drama, it is almost impossible to be seen for who you really are. Life inside such a symbolic relationship is not life, it is illusion. You are no longer perceived as a living, complex person. You are an altered reflection of another's unconscious. There is only one defense against the unconscious manipulator: awareness. You must learn to identify the recurring scripts, the invisible threads tying you to someone else's emotional theater. And most importantly, you must ask yourself, what I am feeling right now, does it truly belong to me, or has it been placed here? Because the manipulator does not barge into your life violently. They slip in quietly, disguised as connection, sympathy, or even love. And here, another question arises, one far more difficult to face. What if manipulation hides even deeper, behind a mask, an image, a role? Jung would have us look next at the persona, the social mask we wear to adapt to the world. It is not inherently harmful. In fact, it is necessary. But when someone begins to live for their persona, to mistake the mask for their true self, the danger changes shape. This type can be even more insidious than the manipulator because they are skilled at making you forget who you are. They never rage, never openly demand, never even admit that they are hiding. Instead, they radiate an image of perfection, the constant smile, the flawless posture, the immaculate life, with no cracks showing. And in our age of external facades, where appearing often outweighs being, this kind of mask is celebrated. But Jung saw it as a warning sign, because the person who becomes too fused with their persona risks losing contact with their own inner core, and when that happens, they not only distort their own reality, they begin to distort yours. In The Ego and the Unconscious, Jung wrote, "The persona is what one appears to be to oneself and to others. It is an artificial construct formed under the pressures of society, familial and professional expectations. The danger begins when the mask becomes fused to the face, when everything spontaneous, vulnerable, and alive is locked away in the basement of the psyche. Living alongside a true persona bearer is like living inside a scripted play. There is no real intimacy, no unpredictability, no depth. Every word feels rehearsed. And slowly you will feel the same expectations turned on you. To be flawless, to never show weakness, to wear your own mask. If you deviate from the script, showing pain, doubt, or raw emotion, the person behind the mask recoils. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've reminded them of the parts of themselves they have locked away." Jung warned that over-identification with the persona is one of the greatest threats to individuation, the journey toward becoming one's true self. The more life becomes about recognition, approval, and admiration, the more the genuine self suffocates beneath the glossy surface. And here's the hidden infection: coexistence with such a person can make you doubt your own authenticity. You begin filtering your words, hiding the parts of yourself that don't fit the ideal. And one day, you realize, you too have put on a mask. At that point, it's not just about their persona. The psychological infection has spread, but the mask cannot contain everything. What is repressed does not disappear. It waits, it ferments in the unconscious, and eventually it erupts, which is where we must go next, into the territory of the shadow. The part of the psyche a person refuses to see until it takes control. When the shadow begins to stir, it rarely announces itself with fanfare. It slips into the cracks of a relationship, hides in the pauses between words, and waits for the right moment to surface. In Jung's view, the shadow is not just the repository of our darker instincts, but also of everything we have disowned, our unexpressed rage, our rejected desires, our unspoken fears. And when someone refuses to face it, that buried material begins to leak into the world in distorted forms. This is where the real danger begins, because when a person is ruled by their unacknowledged shadow, their behavior becomes a series of unconscious strategies, none of them designed for mutual growth. The one who explodes lets the shadow erupt like a storm. Their anger may seem sudden, but it's been fermenting in the dark for years. They may tell you, "You made me do this," as if their outburst were a logical reaction to your actions. In truth, you've become a lightning rod for their unresolved past. The explosion is not about the present. It's about every suppressed moment they never had the courage to confront, and you're left standing in the rubble, wondering how you became the enemy. The one who's always distant hides their shadow behind absence. They withdraw, not only from you, but from themselves. Their silence becomes a wall you cannot climb, a void where intimacy should be. You try to reach them, to bridge the gap, but the more you give, the further they drift, and in the empty space they leave, your mind starts to fill in the blanks. With self-blame, with doubt, with stories that were never true. The silent controller keeps their shadow on a leash, but not for your benefit. They wield control like a sculptor wields a chisel, shaping the relationship to suit their unspoken fears. They rarely raise their voice. They don't need to. Every decision, every suggestion, every subtle shift of approval and disapproval is part of the architecture of power. And slowly, without noticing, you find your life reduced to a narrow path that always leads back to them. The person who always plays the victim has transformed their shadow into a script they know by heart. In their world, life is a series of injustices, and you are either the rescuer or the villain. Their pain may be real, but so is their refusal to step out of the role. By keeping themselves powerless, they pull you into a cycle of guilt, sympathy, and exhaustion. You spend your energy trying to save them, only to realize that rescue was never what they wanted. The drainer lets their shadow bleed into every interaction. Conversations leave you heavy, as if you've been carrying not only your own life, but theirs as well. They might never shout, never accuse, but their need is constant. A quiet gravity that pulls your attention, your time, your strength, until you have nothing left for yourself. And then there is the mirror that shows your dark side. They do not need to manipulate or demand, they simply reflect your unintegrated shadow back at you. Being with them is like standing before a distorted mirror. Every insecurity, every repressed fear, every part of yourself you'd rather not see comes into focus. At first, you might think they're toxic for revealing these truths. But sometimes, the danger is not in what they project. It's in what they awaken within you. The unseen consequence of living around these 6 types is not just emotional fatigue. It's the gradual erosion of your inner boundaries. Your thoughts begin to revolve around their moods. Your choices bend toward their needs. Your sense of self becomes a negotiation. And the most dangerous part? You may not even notice it happening, because the shadow does not only belong to them. Prolonged exposure to another's unintegrated psyche can activate your own. You might find yourself mirroring their patterns, exploding when cornered, withdrawing to avoid conflict, subtly manipulating to regain control, or slipping into the victim's role when life feels too heavy. Jung warned that what remains unconscious in one person will inevitably provoke an unconscious response in another. In close proximity, the psyche is contagious, and if you do not see the infection spreading, it will consume more than your peace. It will consume your identity. Breaking free from the quiet, gravitational pull of these 6 types is not an act of aggression, it is an act of clarity. You cannot win a battle that was never yours to fight, but you can step out of the battlefield entirely, and this begins not with confrontation, but with awareness so sharp it cuts through illusion. The first step is to name what you are facing. The one who explodes is not just passionate. The one who's always distant is not just private. The silent controller is not just helpful. The person who always plays the victim is not just unlucky. The energy drainer is not just tired, and the mirror that shows your dark side is not just honest. These are patterns, repeated psychological structures that will keep playing out until they are seen for what they are. Carl Jung insisted that the act of naming the unconscious robs it of its invisible power. When you can see the pattern, you are no longer just a character in their script. You are the witness. From here, the rebellion takes shape in 3 inner movements. Reclaim your psychological territory. Most people do not realize how much of their inner space they've surrendered to others. You give away your time, your emotional energy, your mental bandwidth without asking, "Do I have the capacity for this?" The first rebellion is learning to pause before you step into someone else's storm. When the energy drainer calls, ask yourself if you have the strength to listen right now. When the one who explodes provokes you, ask whether you want to match their fire or walk away from the flames entirely. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are the structure that keeps you intact. Without them, you are nothing but open ground for other people's shadows to settle upon. Break the symbolic roles. The silent controller and the perpetual victim thrive on casting you in roles you never auditioned for. The most subversive act is to refuse the part. If they expect you to rescue, you let them solve their own problem. If they expect you to submit, you make your own decision without explanation. This is not cruelty, it is the restoration of your autonomy. Jung wrote that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires you to separate from collective scripts. In relationships, this means refusing to live as a projection of someone else's unconscious. Turn the mirror back to yourself. Perhaps the hardest truth to face is that these patterns survive because some part of you allows them. The mirror that shows your dark side is dangerous precisely because they awaken your own unintegrated traits. If you recoil from them, it may be because you see something familiar. The rebellion here is radical self-honesty, asking not only, "What are they doing to me?" but also, "Why am I still here?" You cannot demand that another person confront their shadow while leaving yours in the dark. The more you integrate your own repressed emotions, the less susceptible you become to someone else's psychological pull. Practical acts of rebellion. Limit your exposure. If you cannot remove the one who explodes or the energy drainer from your life entirely, reduce the emotional time you spend with them. Even a small buffer creates space to breathe. Document reality. Gaslighting, subtle or overt, is a favorite tool of the silent controller. Keep records of conversations and agreements to anchor yourself in truth. Detach from outcome. The person who always plays the victim thrives on pulling you into their narrative. Refuse to measure your worth by whether they get better. That is not your responsibility. Cultivate an inner refuge. Meditation, journaling, therapy, anything that reconnects you with your own inner voice will strengthen your immunity against the pull of another's unconscious. Seek mirrors you can trust. Surround yourself with people who reflect your best self, not your wounds. Jung believed that every act of conscious choice is a blow struck against the tyranny of the unconscious. Rebellion in this sense is not loud, it is consistent. Every time you choose to protect your peace, instead of being pulled into a pattern, you weaken its hold. But there is one more step, one final truth that shifts everything. The moment you see it, the entire game changes. And it's not about them at all. It's about you. The greatest revelation you can have about the 6 types is not that they exist, it is that they are inevitable. Humanity has never been free from them. They live in every era, in every city, in every family. And the most disquieting truth of all, fragments of them live in you. Carl Jung warned us that the qualities we condemn most fiercely in others often reflect the unacknowledged parts of ourselves. The one who explodes? Perhaps there is a part of you that has swallowed rage for years, waiting for its own eruption. The one who's always distant? Maybe you too have withdrawn from others to avoid being hurt. The silent controller? There might be moments when you nudge situations from the shadows rather than speaking openly. The person who always plays the victim? Have you ever longed for someone to rescue you? The energy drainer? Perhaps you've leaned on someone else when you had nothing left to give, and the mirror that shows your dark side? Maybe you've been that mirror for others, even without meaning to. We are not separate from these patterns, we are participants. The line between us and them is far thinner than our pride likes to admit. And here is the paradox. When you deny that these traits exist in you, you are more vulnerable to them in others. But when you recognize them, truly see them, you gain the power to disarm them. Jung called this process shadow integration. It is the act of turning toward what you've hidden from yourself, not to destroy it, but to reclaim it. Because what is integrated cannot control you from the dark. This is the ultimate rebellion, not cutting people out of your life in fear, but becoming so anchored in your own self-awareness that no mask, no projection, no unconscious storm can pull you under. Here is what that looks like in practice. When the one who explodes rages, you see their fire without matching it. You recognize the flames of your own suppressed anger, but you choose not to let them consume you. When the one who's always distant retreats, you don't chase them into the shadows. You honor their space while guarding your own from loneliness-driven self-betrayal. When the silent controller tries to weave you into their hidden web, you feel the threads forming and step aside before they tighten. When the person who always plays the victim hands you their burden, you acknowledge it without shouldering it. When the energy drainer seeks your attention, you give only what you can without emptying yourself. When the mirror that shows your dark side reveals something uncomfortable, you look not away, but inward. Because in the end, the quiet destroyers of peace do not just test our boundaries. They illuminate our unfinished work. Every encounter with them is a mirror. Every irritation, every emotional trigger, every sense of, why does this keep happening to me, is an invitation to meet yourself at a deeper level. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the final key. The people you think just happen to appear in your life are often drawn to the unhealed spaces within you. And when you heal, when you bring those spaces into awareness, the patterns shift or disappear entirely. The ultimate truth is this: peace is not the absence of dangerous people. It is the presence of a self that no longer fears them. When you know who you are, your light, your shadow, your wounds and your strength, you cannot be quietly destroyed. You may be tested, yes. You may feel the pull of someone's unconscious trying to merge with yours, but you will recognize it for what it is, and you will stand unshaken. In this way, the 6 types become less like enemies and more like teachers, difficult, uncomfortable, sometimes brutal, but always revealing the path back to yourself. So the next time you feel your peace slipping away, pause, breathe, ask, what in me is being shown right now? And remember, your peace was never theirs to take. Carl Jung repeated one truth over and over: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Sometimes the most dangerous people in our lives aren't obviously toxic. They don't scream, hit, or lie. Sometimes they're the ones who confuse you, drain you, or make you feel small without ever raising their voice. And sometimes you are that person too. That doesn't mean you're broken or bad. It means you're human. It means you grew up learning certain survival patterns like shutting down, pleasing others, avoiding hard conversations, or seeking constant validation, because once that was the only way to feel safe, and other people learned the same. Jung didn't name these types to shame anyone. His purpose was to show how unhealed pain manifests in relationships. If someone in your life fits one of these types, you don't have to confront them or cut them off right now. Start with something far more powerful: noticing. Notice how you feel around them. Notice where your energy goes, what you tolerate, and what your nervous system has mistaken for love. And if, in reading this, you see parts of yourself, especially the one who shuts down, the one who gives too much, or the one who always feels like a victim, that's okay too. It doesn't make you the villain of your story. It means you are ready to heal the version of you that once needed those coping patterns to survive. Healing begins with honesty, so ask yourself, who makes me feel small, anxious, or constantly unsure? Who drains me no matter how much I give? And when do I become that person to others? You don't need to have all the answers right now. Start with noticing. That is where your power begins. You deserve relationships that feel like rest, not war. And it all starts with being honest about who truly belongs close to your heart and who doesn't.